The continuing resolution passed by Congress affects every agency's ability to fund new initiatives. For the Pentagon, the CR will stall New START programs as well as production increases. Todd Harrison is Director of Defense Budget Analysis and the Aerospace Security Project at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Todd, welcome.
Hi, good to be back.
Continuing resolutions have become pretty common. The Pentagon has learned to work around them, but what are the biggest problems that you see the CR creating that can't be worked around?
Yeah, well, not only have they become common, looking back at the data over the past 50 years or so, DoD has started the fiscal year on a continuing resolution 80% of the time. So not only is it common, it's normal. And so DoD has adapted its processes, its programs and plans. Generally one of the ways you adapt is you recognize when you're putting together plans for New START programs and production increases that don't count on being able to do that and begin execution in the first quarter of the fiscal year. So program managers, if they've been around the Pentagon at all, they know this. And so they're not planning to do these things in the first quarter of the fiscal year. And so generally, short-term CRs, they just last 1, 2, 3 months. They're not that disruptive. It's when the CR gets past 3 months that it starts to become more disruptive on what the Pentagon was planning to do.
So would you say that there are any specific military services that are particularly affected by a CR?
Well, they're all affected. They all have New START programs. I'm looking at some things in particular, tracking the Air Force, various programs that they were planning as New STARTs this year. There's even activities like standing up the Space Force's Space Warfighting and Analysis Center. There's new funding for that in the budget, and under a continuing resolution, they don't have the funding yet. So some of these activities are going to be slowed down, and various, development programs that they were planning to start or move to a different phase of development, they just can't do that yet.
So what are the actual workarounds that New START programs will have to use besides maybe putting off starting in the beginning? Is there other things that they can do to work around?
Well, there's not a lot. You have to be careful because Congress, intentionally writes continuing resolutions to prevent these New STARTs and things because they haven't had a chance yet to approve them and to determine what they want to allow to go ahead and what does Congress not approve of and does not want to allow to get started or to increase, a production rate of a particular weapon system. So, there's really not a lot they can do to get around it. And, it's worth pointing out that pain is intentional, right? If Congress provided exceptions in the continuing resolution and said, this New START program is an exception, we'll allow it to go ahead, or this production increase is okay, we'll allow it to go ahead. The more exceptions they make, the less painful the continuing resolution is. And at some point, if the continuing resolution is not sufficiently painful, then there's not a good forcing function for Congress to come back and actually pass a regular full-year appropriations bill.
Right, and there was a GAO report that said, the Pentagon's done pretty well in managing with CRs.
It has, yes. And if you look at the record, it's the Pentagon actually, the financial managers are wizards of a sort. They can do a lot of things to help recover once a regular appropriations bill is passed. And so they can try to speed things up in the second part of the fiscal year to recover time lost earlier. There's only so much they can do. There's only so much magic, budgetary magic they can pull. When a continuing resolution, gets as long as 6 months. We even had one a few years ago that lasted 7 months into the fiscal year. There's, increasingly fewer things that you can do to recover at that point.
So there's a December 3rd deadline, I believe. What's going to happen at the Pentagon as we get closer to that deadline?
Well, they're going to be watching closely. And, one of the, difficulties under a continuing resolution is the money gets allocated out slowly, right? And so they have to keep dribbling the money out to program managers and commanders across the force so that they don't overspend. And so they're watching that carefully as they go. And when they get close to December 3rd, depending on how the politics look at the time, they may have to start preparing for a government shutdown again. And start doing early preparatory activities if it looks like Congress might not agree to an extension of the continuing resolution, or more optimistically, hopefully, they'll be looking at getting a full appropriations bill passed by that time. We'll have to wait and see.
All right, we'll wait and see. Todd, thanks so much for joining us.
All right, thank you.